Good evening, everyone. My name is Ken Hui. I'm a CAHF board member. Welcome to the 15th of 31 presentations of AAPI talks celebrating the AAPI Heritage Month. This event is sponsored by the Chinese American Heritage Foundation. The Chinese American Heritage Foundation is dedicated to celebrating the rich history of Chinese Americans' contributions to the American spirit. For information on how you can participate, it's available at our website, cahf.us. During this presentation, please use Zoom's Q&A function to ask your questions, and we'll read them during the Q&A period. This Zoom event is being recorded. Tonight, we have an amazing panel who would give a preview of the groundbreaking National Day of Solidarity Against AAPI Hate. Our panel moderator is CAHF's co-founder, Mr. Wilson Lee. Joining him on the panel are Mr. Henry S. Tang, singer and songwriter Ka, Olympic boxer and recent law school graduate Dara Shen, Anne Martin-Montgomery with the Yellow Whistle program, and Virginia Ng with the OCA. We'll go ahead and start with Mr. Henry S. Tang. Henry has been engaged in pioneering the recognition of Asian and Chinese Americans into the full participation of American life. During the 1970s and 1980s, he chaired the Chinese American Planning Council and helped introduce newly arrived Asian immigrants to the many facets of social, educational, and working programs of American society. What began as a bootstrap enterprise has turned into a $250 million public program enterprise serving 6,000 to 8,000 daily. During the 1990s and 2000s, he co-founded the Committee of 100, which engaged in high diplomatic dialogue, bridging relations between Washington and Beijing. He has also been actively engaged with numerous public, private, governmental, and charitable institutions to bridge and open opportunities for Asians and Chinese in the USA. Henry Tang was also the first Asian Chinese investment banker on Wall Street and was among the first Asian managing director partners of a Wall Street firm after graduation from Columbia University. Today, almost 50 years later, he continues his pioneering quest for full inclusion of all Asians into all aspects of American society, especially during the current challenging environment. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Henry Tang.
Good evening. Thank you very much to the Chinese American Heritage Foundation for doing all of this during Asian Heritage Month, the month of May. This 31-day program is a very, very ambitious undertaking and has been a success every night so far. One of my purposes tonight is to encourage the audience to join in the CAHF joint sponsorship with Committee of 100 of a panel tomorrow night at 8 o'clock, also the same time, the past, the present, and the future, the US-China relationship and its impact on Asian Americans in our quest for total inclusion. I've been asked to, I guess, maybe augment a little bit of what's going to happen tomorrow and bring to light a observation that I just sort of accidentally came across. And I've put the rhetorical question out that the Chinese in America, how much have we progressed? For those who are not as familiar with Committee 100, I would just like to have a brief introduction here. May we have the slides? Are the slides out? I mean, okay. So this is the announcement page for tomorrow night, and I do hope you join us. Next slide, please. These are the 6 of us who helped to co-found the Committee of 100. This is the year 1989, after the June 4th incident in China, where there was almost a movement towards global ostracization of China's activities, not too dissimilar to similar to what's happening sometimes today. I would like to introduce two of them, need no introduction. The fellow standing in the middle is some, I don't know, obscure person who joined in, but that's what I looked 30 odd years ago. But to my right at that time is Yo-Yo Ma, who needs no introduction. To my left is Oscar Tang, who is today, after having had a very, very successful career in entrepreneurial businesses, has become a full-time philanthropist and co-chairs the New York Philharmonic, is active in the Metropolitan Museum, and also is active in many, shall we just say, nonprofit engagement for the promotion of Chinese culture, Chinese language, other Asian activities, supported exhibitions at Asia Society and so forth. Seated, of course, all the way to the left is the famous I.M. Pei, who probably needs very little introduction. I.M. Pei, well, I'll tell a story about it on the next slide. Seated in the middle is a lady who's a wonderful, wonderful person, and she deserves every recognition she's getting today. If you go to the post office and ask for a Lunar New Year stamp, the current Lunar New Year stamp features her face, and she is Professor Dr. Wu Jianqiong. The story of Wu Jianqiong is very, very interesting because two of her students, mentees, if you will, went on to be the first Asian Americans to win the Nobel Prize in Physics. And side story to that is that she wasn't included into it because way back then in the early 1950s, it was not a good practice, or just not practice, to award Nobel Prizes to women. Of course, modern society has corrected that, but she should have been every bit a winner of the Nobel Prize as her students. And see, to her left is Shirley Young, one of our co-founders, who was one of the first Asian women to become a corporate officer of no other than General Motors. And she went on to promote and help General Motors spearheading it into their entree into China. If we may have the next picture, which I think tells more of a story about I.M. Pei, because at a dinner several years before the founding of Committee 100, I.M. Pei and I attended a dinner where we were seated next to Henry Kissinger. And Henry Kissinger made a comment that I.M. Pei at that time, this was around 1985, 86, I.M. Pei at that time should spearhead the creation of an organization like the Committee 100. We didn't know a Committee 100 would evolve 2 or 3 years later, but it was at the instigation, inspiration, and the urging of Dr. Henry Kissinger to I.M. Pei that inspired and created the existence of Committee 100. So that's somewhat of an interesting beginning of how C100 got its beginning. To move on to the topic that I chose, Chinese in America, how much have we progressed? Back in 1999, if I may have the next slide, I came across a chart, as you can see, a graph chart here, on September 14th, 1999, put out by the Wall Street Journal and the NBC News poll. And it was measuring China as an adversary. And I looked at it, of course, with great interest. And I was very, very surprised and very shocked almost when I saw the very, very high numbers of what different segments of American society, how they regarded China as an adversary. Southern conservatives, as you can see, was as high as 80%. Republicans was 75%. Democrats was 64%, and liberals was 60%. This absolutely shocked me. But subsequently, I've shown this chart to many, many people in the course of the last 20 years. Many people, shall we say, dismissed it and just said they were probably wrong in the data collection and so on. And it was not actually the actual case. More recently, I came across the Pew Research, the famous Pew Research, and they conducted a poll. And the poll, as you can see here, what percentage of Americans see China as negative? The questions are very, very similar. I don't think the Wall Street Journal or NBC conducted subsequent polls asking the same question. But it was interesting that over 22 years later, we come across Pew Research asking the same question. And it's interesting, as you see, it's a little bit color-coded here. Republicans today are 79%, seeing China as a negative. Conservatives are 88% compared to 80% before. Democrats are 63%, I believe, similar to before, and liberals are 57% compared to 60%. So the observation here is that there hasn't been much progress made in the course of 22 years. And I think I'd like to take this opportunity to bring this observation to an awareness of all Asians that there's still a great deal of work to be done. And this is an effort that should be a joint effort with all Asians of all stripes, together with many other groups, our African American friends, our Latinx friends, other progressive groups, other groups, total understanding, and even conservative groups. We should be in a discussion with them, because in 22 years to see not much improvement, if this was a report card, I'd have to say that we got a C+ back in 1999, and here in 2021, we're still maybe at a C+, maybe barely B-. And we should really be in an A- category. Those numbers, we should be much lower. And I bring that to the attention of everyone because we need to separate the difference also between American attitudes and the global attitudes towards China as a country, and also towards Asian Americans and Chinese Americans. Going back to 1999 and 2000, we may have the next slide. We at the Committee 100 conducted a survey because, having seen the NBC Wall Street Journal survey, we conducted one of our own, bringing out and expostulating many of the sensitive questions that were shown by the 1999 Wall Street survey. I'd like to show one or two observations here. Next slide. Now, mind you, these are from the year 2000, 2001. And here's a key finding of attitudes towards Chinese Americans by Americans at that time. Very negative attitudes, 25%, somewhat negative attitudes, 43%. If you add the two together, that's a huge 68% with at least somewhat negative attitudes that Americans were having towards Chinese Americans. Another interesting observation, if I may have the next slide. We asked a rhetorical question, how would you feel about voting for an Asian American for being president of the United States? Very interesting observations here. The black lines or the dark lines are those people who have a so-called uncomfortable reaction towards an Asian American as president of the United States. That number at that time was 52%. For African Americans, who of course, shortly afterwards, roughly 18 years after this. With 35% uncomfort factor, we were able to elect a African American as president. A woman, 21%, and Jewish American, 25%. The startling number out there, of course, Asian Americans, 52% uncomfort factor of having an Asian American as president. And I think I have one more slide. And closer to home for today, we also asked 20 years ago the question, do you think Chinese Americans passing on secret information to the Chinese government is a problem? So you see the dark pie chart here, is a problem is 46%. Those who are not sure is 16%. If you add those two numbers together, it's 62%, still almost 2/3. So the interesting observation by the report card that we just showed earlier is that not much has changed and it still remains a very, very substantial problem. Today, we are, as a group, as Asian Americans, facing a very, very huge challenge of our citizens being attacked for reasons that are difficult to understand when considering the fact that the contributions of Asians towards America have been huge. Along with Wu Jianchung's students, 8 scientists primarily of who were Chinese Americans won Nobel Prizes, not for China or some other Asian country, but for the United States of America during these last 50 years. We've had many, many challenges. I mean, there was the Wen-Ho Lee crisis of 20 years ago also. Some people are familiar with it, but that sort of segued itself now into there are probably several thousand Wen-Ho Lees being investigated under charges of suspicious activity of one or another. Many are still in limbo. The cases have not been tried. There are no verdicts. And many of the professors and scientists and STEM people are living in limbo. Committee 100 got very involved in the Wen-Ho Lee case 20 years ago. About 5 or 6 years ago, we also got very involved in supporting a weather scientist by the name of Sherry Chen, where both in the Wen-Ho Lee and the Sherry Chen case, the difficulties come from their coworkers reporting their suspicious activity. Hopefully we'll get into this discussion of what was considered suspicious activity. Obviously, they were not suspicious in the end. Asian Americans' impact on American society is huge. We could all pick our number of our starting time. We could start from the gold rush of the 1840s, the railroad building of the 1860s, and then the terrible injustices of the 1882 Exclusion Act, and on and on. The McCarthy period during the 1950s was not exactly a pleasant period also. There are many, many examples of this, but I will, in the interest of time, I will just stop here and we can go into it in the open discussion later on. By the way, finally, before I do close, I would also like to mention, and I see it's on the program, so I will not take away, but there are free yellow whistles now being distributed and sponsored by our good friends Agnes and Oscar Tang to as many Asians as well as all Americans out there. So anyone wanting these yellow whistles, I'm sure there's another presentation along those lines. But here's the yellow whistle. You can get one.
Great, thank you, Henry. And again, we will read off the questions at the end of this program or towards the end of the program. All right, thank you. Those numbers are quite interesting. I would have thought that the numbers could have gotten better by 2020, 2021.
Well, I was when I was presenting the 1999 numbers to friends and associates and colleagues, and I've been holding it in my pocket to present to people for the last ever since 1999. And as I said, most people said those numbers have to be wrong, but just by accident, I came across the Pew numbers, Pew research numbers, which reinforced the numbers of 1999. So I call that the report card for the whole condition that we are living under right now.
All right, thank you very much, Henry. Next, we have Ka. Ka is a Vietnamese-American singer and songwriter who was born and raised in Washington, D.C. Her newest single, No More, tells the history of the collective Asian American experience throughout the past 200 years and addresses our various struggles with racism, othering, and the model minority myth. Ka's accompanying music video includes a powerful historical imagery as well as a montage of solidarity amongst today's Asian American community and our allies. So let me cue this up and we'll watch Ka's video of No More.
Not gonna let you hold us down. We're gonna rise up and stand our ground, and we won't keep quiet no more. You lured us overseas, fed us lies so we'd believe that we could have everything you have. And we built your railroad tracks while you walked upon our backs. But in the end, we never got our half. With dynamite and rope put in our hands, all so you could go and take more land. But no more. We're not gonna let you hold us down. Gonna rise up and stand our ground, and we won't keep quiet no more. We bled for your dream, but it wasn't what it seemed, 'cause you could never see us as the same. So when the red sun came to rise and bombs fell from the sky, we turned out to be the ones you'd blame. You took our rights and all our liberties and put us in internment on our knees. But no more. We're not gonna let you hold us down. We're gonna rise up and stand our ground, and we won't keep quiet no more. We fled from your wars and landed on these shores. You told us this was the land of the free, and so we played your game while you tried to change our names, 'cause you wanted model minorities. All those years of suffering and pain, it feels like nothing's ever gonna change. But no more. We're not gonna let you hold us down. We're gonna rise up and stand our ground, and we won't keep quiet no more. No, we won't keep quiet no more. No.
God, what an incredible music video. I mean, I'm going to recommend that Henry invite you to the next C100 Gala and sing for everyone. You know, that was just amazing, incredible. You have a really beautiful voice. And it must took a lot of work and effort to put this together. I mean, you know, what inspired you? I just want to hear about, you know, your story, you know?
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, first of all, yeah, I would be honored if Henry would like to invite me to the gala at some point. I'd be happy to sing that song. And thank you all for having me on tonight as well. It's truly great to be able to participate in these types of discussions and also to share a little bit of background on the song and how it came to be. So essentially, like many of you, it's been a very challenging year for us as a community, as a pan-Asian American community, and particularly for, this past year with the pandemic and everything that we've been enduring as a society. But for me, the tipping point was really the shootings in Atlanta that happened on March 16th. And that was a difficult week for me, especially because it brought up a lot of past traumas and experiences that I've had growing up with racism and othering and things like that. So I felt like the best way for me to process through all of those emotions, the anger, the frustration, was to put pen to paper and use my creative outlet in order to put all of that down into lyrics. And I worked on the song many sleepless nights, not very much sleep since then, of course, as well. But I'm really proud of the collective efforts from my producers, as well as all of the people that sent in their video clips for that montage of solidarity. And then, being a student of history, I love to read, especially about any point in history. And in particular, for me, I really wanted to use this as a teaching opportunity to ensure that people understood, though there's been a significant rise in hate crimes towards the Asian American community, it's not new. Hate towards us, racism towards us is not new, as the video shows. I wanted to focus on very specific moments of what I consider to be atrocious, racism towards Asian Americans, starting with, verse 1, the Chinese railroad workers and how they were viewed as very cheap and disposable labor. And of course, as Henry alluded to earlier, the 60+ years of legislation regarding the Chinese exclusion laws and the impact that had on that particular immigrant population. And of course, and how that molded our society and perceptions towards Asian Americans as well. And then verse 2, really wanting to bring to light a part of American history that many people aren't aware of, which is that Americans of Japanese descent, some of whom were second and third generation Americans born and raised in this country, were put into internment camps shortly after the Pearl Harbor bombings by the Imperial Japanese. So that is something that I really wanted to emphasize as well, and just bring that to light. And the irony, especially with the fact that while their brothers and sisters and family members were being put into these internment camps, Americans of Japanese descent were forming the 442nd, which is the most highly decorated military infantry, in our history, fighting in World War II against the Nazis and everything, and fighting for this country because it was their country. But the irony that the U.S. government at the time decided to put all of their family members into these internment camps. So that's what I really wanted to highlight, is that history. And then of course, kind of progressing through time and a lot of the immigrant population that came to this country, whether as refugees from war, et cetera, and how that's impacted us to this day, so we're all American citizens, but yet somehow, whether we were born here or born abroad, we're still seen as that perpetual foreigner. So that's really why I wanted to write the song and use it as basically a primer, if you will, for people who may not be aware of our history and what we've struggled collectively as Asian Americans.
So it is our hope that your song will be played on May 31st as the official anthem for the movement that we're trying to start. And I'm going to jump around with the panelists, okay? Because you just talked about World War II. And we're so blessed to have with us Virginia Ng. She is the National Vice President of OCA, Asian Pacific American Advocate. And her father was a World War II veteran, right? Virginia, can you please share? And she actually is one of the co-chair of the National Day of Solidarity against AAPI hate in Virginia, in New Jersey. So Virginia, please unmute yourself and share.
Hi, and thank you for inviting me to be on this panel. I'm a very proud American who has had a father who has since passed, who served in World War II during, as a member of the 7th Army stationed in North Africa. I have a picture of my father along with his brother and a cousin. And it's in the book, the World War II, that was actually done recently. I just sent in my money for the dinner in DC too. I want to make sure I'm part of that. We have a table of 8. There's 8 of us that are coming. I was born and raised in North Carolina. My father grew up in Alabama. My grandfather was the immigrant. And I was not always involved with Chinese Americans or even Asian Americans until recently, 20 years ago, I was asked to go to a meeting of OCA. And while I was there, I must have asked a lot of questions because the next thing they did was got me to be president of the chapter. I was president for 3 years, and subsequently, I just stayed at it. OCA is a big part of my heart and my work. Now, Ka, I was very, very impressed with your song. I wrote it down. I want to get a copy of it. And listen, I want to play this during our National Day of Solidarity.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I'll actually, oh, I'm sorry, Virginia. I'll actually be performing live. I'll be performing No More Live at the flagship rally in Washington, D.C. on the National Mall for the National Day of Solidarity against AAPI hate. So that'll be great. If there's anyone that's tuning into this now, please tell everyone. I'll be there. It starts at 4 p.m. just as it does in the other cities. And by all means, whatever city you're in, blast the song, because it is, when I wrote it, I definitely intended it to be the anthem for our movement, you know, not just for this day, but for the whole movement of stopping Asian hate, for sure.
I'm very technology champion. Okay, challenge. I don't know how to do that. So I got to find Wilson.
Thank you so much, Virginia.
We have scheduled to be held in Jersey City, which is the most diverse city in New Jersey. Okay, we have the mayor coming, we have the Secretary of State speaking, and a wide gamut of LGBT, African American, a veteran who's also a pastor. We have a Southeast Asian commissioner from New Jersey. So I really went out and recruited everybody I knew.
Virginia, thank you so much. Ka is a rock star in DC, but you know what? You're a rock star in New Jersey. God bless you. We love you. We love you. So this actually is a perfect segue to a member of our Metro DC team. Actually, Ka is also a member of the DC team, but we're really honored and blessed to have an incredible person. Her name is Dara Shen, and believe it or not, she's a badass woman, okay? She is a former Olympic boxer. Oh my goodness, I never knew that. I have to be careful what I say to her from now on. And she's a recent law school graduate. Dara organized a rally for solidarity in DC in March, which prompted her involvement with our National Day of Solidarity against AAPI hate on Memorial Day, Monday, May 31st, 4 o'clock on the East Coast, and simultaneously all across America, and 1 p.m. on the West Coast. So Dara want to bring her effort to bridge the gap between the Asian and Black community and all communities of color by encouraging honest and open discussion and working together with everyone to achieve the American dream. And congratulations, I think you just graduated from law school. Did you just graduate?
Yesterday, yes, thank you.
And you know what? She's a busy mom. She has a beautiful 2-year-old, which I see behind. And actually, you know what? I couldn't ask for a better prop. I mean, you know, this is what we're doing it for. You know, honestly, I think Virginia and I can speak for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people working to organize this rally. We're doing it for the next generation. And right behind you, that's what we're doing for. I'm sure that's what we're all doing it for. So thank you.
Yes.
Please share with us.
Hi, I do have to apologize in advance because I am in so many ways at his mercy.
No, this is wonderful. This is wonderful.
But you're absolutely right. A lot of the work that we do, we don't see the immediate effects of. And so let me share a little bit more about my background and how I got to be here today. So I was born and raised in San Francisco. I lived there until I was 11. From 11 to 15, I lived in Utah. And then from 15 on, I lived in Virginia, mostly Northern Virginia. I went to Virginia Tech as well, go Hokies. And that really shaped a lot of my experience when it comes to race. So in San Francisco, I lived in a predominantly Black neighborhood. In Utah, it was very, very white. And I came to Virginia in the DC metro area, it was very mixed. And I tell this story all the time when I talk about why I started boxing, because I felt like there was just nowhere for me to belong. I didn't belong in the white crowd, didn't belong in the Black crowd. And it just felt like there wasn't a place for me. Even when I fought, I represented both the US national team and then later the Taiwanese national team. So yeah, and the interesting thing, which Ka mentioned, this concept of being the perpetual foreigner, is when I was on the US national team, I was always referred to as the Asian girl. The Asian girl. And so when I went to, and it was, you know, that's if people were being politically correct. Most times it was the Chinese girl. And so when I fought for Taiwan, I was the American girl. And so I just looking back, I'm like, you know, I was frustrated. I really wanted someone to just claim me. I just wanted to belong to a group. And so it's been very impactful and meaningful for me to kind of find this amazing tribe of people who are dedicated to doing the work. You know, Wilson, Ka are just two of many people. I think we've got more than a dozen people on the committee for the DC rally. All of us who are rally organizing on top of our full-time jobs, many of us with families and other obligations. So it just goes to show the level of passion that we're dealing with here, right? We're dealing with something that's so much greater than ourselves. So secondly, I will touch briefly on why I specifically called out the relations between Asian and Black communities. So as Wilson mentioned, I just graduated from law school. I attended UDC Law, which is an HBCU. It's a historically Black college. It's one of only 6 historically Black law schools in the country. And so I bring that up to say it's really given me the opportunity to learn the law from a critical race lens. And it's also given me the opportunity to put kind of all of my life experience in terms of why I felt the way that I felt in terms of being stereotyped, being told, you know, Mr. Henry, when you said, when you showed that slide about whether or not people would feel comfortable with an Asian president, that really resonated with a lot of the work that I've been doing. I've been president of the Asian Pacific American Law Students Association at my school for 2 terms. And one of the issues that we addressed is the fact that there is this glass ceiling for Asians where we tend to perform very well in white collar jobs, but we don't get to the executive level because Asians are often seen as not being assertive enough and not being in decision-making capacity. And that is a stereotype that we're obviously here to change. So All that being said, I'm very excited to work with everyone, and I'm here to also, alongside CAHF, promote the DC rally and all of the rallies. May 31st is going to be a big bang. Like, we've been putting so much into this, and it's going to be really a day to remember. And we're doing it really, here we go. He's watching Totoro for any Studio Ghibli fans out there. Right. So, yeah.
So, Dara, I cannot talk about the DC rally without mentioning Tom Fong. I mean, Tom Fong put together an amazing group of leaders, young leaders with brilliant ideas. And, we hope that Tom will join us on stage on May 31st. And actually, the DC rally has kind of morphed from a normal one of 20 rallies into the flagship rally of this movement. You guys are right on the National Mall, right in the middle of the National Mall. Directly behind you is the U.S. Capitol. Directly in front of you is the Washington Monument. I mean, that's like a Martin Luther King moment. I mean, I wish I could join you, but I have to be in Boston to help organize that one. But you guys are rocking. So I just want to share. Yeah. I'm sorry,
I was just going to say, it's definitely going to be a historic event, especially given the context of the location. It's right on the grassy area on the National Mall between 7th and 9th. And, as we know, that's been where many rallies have been held. A lot of inaugurations, have spilled over to that portion of the mall as well. And yeah, Tom Fong is the gentleman who is the glue for all of us. He kind of brought all of us together in various ways, and we all got involved in this. And I think one thing I just wanted to kind of call out or piggyback on, rather, to Dara's point, which is that, we're finally mobilizing, right? I think when I have read through all of the different ways in which Asian Americans have either protested or tried to speak up and what have you. I mean, the last time that we really did this as a community was in the 70s with Vincent Chin's murder. And we've not really, we didn't really sustain that momentum throughout the decades. And now with everything that's going on, I just think it's sad, obviously, why we are mobilizing, but it's, the silver lining is that we are. And I'm just really proud of all of the generations that are coming together. And then all of the different communities, not just our Asian American community, but, the Black community, the Latin community, all the people that understand that what we're commonly standing up against and speaking up about is hate and racism, right? So I just think that that's a beautiful thing. And I'm very proud to be a part of this movement and to make this small contribution to it in some way.
Well, thank you so much. And Henry mentioned it earlier, one of his co-founder of the Committee 100 is Oscar Tang. And Oscar and his lovely wife is funding the Yellow Whistle program. And we're so honored to have with us Anne Martin-Montgomery, who's going to share with us a little about her program, the Yellow Whistle program, that will be active in we try to get them all participating in all the rallies across the country on May 31st. So Anne, you have the floor. Please share with us how you guys came about. Where did you guys get the idea with the whistle?
Well, thank you very much. It's really wonderful to be on the panel this evening with all of you. And Ka, I absolutely loved your music, your creative vision, and its deeply important historical roots. There are so many families and so many children that are not taught this history in school, and therefore it's even more important that it reaches them through a song like what you've written. So I want to say thank you. I'm here tonight to represent the Yellow Whistle. The idea came about because of the two extraordinary women, Agnes Xu Tang and her friend Leon. They watched in abject horror as those two doormen didn't respond to watching a woman being beaten feet away from them. And they decided they couldn't simply be bystanders. They had to stand up and do something. So late night texts after that video hit social media is what prompted the Yellow Whistle to come about. They were looking at what could they do to provide a meaningful, useful tool that could be disseminated quickly to help Asian American populations, especially those that are most vulnerable, in a quick, effective means. They quickly went through a lot of ideas, whether it would be pepper spray or some other type of device, but they kept coming back to a whistle because it's simple. It can be worn on the wrist. It can't be used against a victim. It's something that a victim can use to empower themselves to call for help. So they quickly decided to do 10,000. And that grew within a week to 50,000. And in a week and a half, it became, let's get 100,000 out across the country. So now we are absolutely delighted to say we have 100 partners across the United States representing Asian American communities of all types, of all areas that are really feeling the fear and wanting to take back and be empowered. And the name of the project really came from Oscar and Agnes talking about, well, what should we call it? And he really was the inspiration in saying, I want to take back this word yellow. I want to reappropriate it. And I want to make this an empowering thing. Their goal is for the yellow whistle to become a symbol of Asian American united as a community. And that's really our purpose here. These whistles are provided at no cost to community service organizations that can get them out, primarily to impacted communities, but also to allies. So as an ally, I'm really proud to be one of the original co-founders in helping get the messaging out. But the idea was really two extraordinary women late at night saying, we're going to stand up. We're not putting up with this. Don't go after women in our community. Don't go after anyone in our community. And I have to say that as an ally, I don't have an Asian American friend or boss or child that has not been impacted directly by a hate crime. And it's not new. And certainly COVID has made it so much more front and center and dangerous. And I hear this from my friends every single day, that it feels more dangerous. So just today, we were at the Unity Rally Against Hate in Washington, D.C., and some others across the nation, but we have partnered with organizations like the Bhutanese community of Central Ohio that is so afraid they've removed their exterior signage on the building. They had an incident where someone basically took one of their members hostage in his own home. We have the Chinese American Citizens Alliance in DC and Philadelphia Chinatown Development Corporation that are working to do neighborhood watch type programs, getting whistles to essential workers staffing restaurants so that they have something to call for help on their way back from work. Just 2 weeks ago, we had multiple attacks of essential workers in our Chinatown in broad daylight. So today, I know in Philadelphia, we had a women's health initiative that was handing out whistles in addition to the rally in DC. We will participate in a minimum, as of today, three of the rallies on the 31st, and we're working to get participation of more of our partners across the country. So we are thrilled to be a part of this. And I also want to say on behalf of Agnes and Oscar that they're traveling. And so they were unable to attend this evening, and they wanted to say a special thank you to Henry Tang for his leadership and inspiration. And we're just absolutely thrilled to be a part of helping Asian American communities across the country stand up and say no more.
Oscar and Agnes,
thank you so much.
Listening.
Let's bring Henry back. Let's bring Henry back.
And Oscar and Agnes may be listening. So.
Awesome.
They're actually texting me at the moment. So,
okay.
So
Ken,
congratulations on your work, your vision, and most importantly, your muscle power.
So Ken, remember we invited Henry to Boston in July 2019, and it was at our CAHF 55th biannual convention that Henry shared with me, and this is July 2019. He says, Wilson, this trade war that the US is having with China is gonna have a tremendous detrimental effect on the Chinese community, on the Asian community. It's gonna be 10 times, 100 times worse than what happened during McCarthyism. And I kind of look at Henry and says, Americans, they'll forget easily. This thing will die down and we'll just move on. So Henry, I apologize for not believing in you. And I have to give you credit. You saw this coming. None of us saw it. So I mean, I guess wisdom comes with age. So you caught it right on the spot. I guess that's why you make so much money in the investment field. You can foresee the future. And that's why I'm still
about age.
bored,
I have black hair and you have gray hair. So,
I know.
But I do think I have a few years on you. Yes, this was, I've been a student of this. I guess it started, well, when I was 10 years old. The FBI came to visit my father and interview him because he was reading a Chinese newspaper.
Oh my goodness.
And at the same time in grammar school, they would teach me about freedom of the press. And the two just didn't come together. So for the rest of my life, I've been spending time trying to understand these contradictions and paradoxes inside American society. There's much that we can do. All of us, now that we're being unified and have brought unity together with all the Asian groups, South Asian as well as East Asian, together with other groups like in ADL, Anti-Defamation League, Black Lives Matter, Korean groups, Japanese groups. We're coming together. But as a multi-decade observer of this, we cannot afford to, this time especially, let down our guard. I was just very accidentally came across those results on the report card. They speak volumes, I think, because people like me, since whatever you want to call it, 60s and 70s, all the way into the 80s and 90s, were part of all of this. And look at this today. Pew Research says we barely moved the needle.
So Henry, I wish I had you as my professor because you gave us a C+. I probably would have flunked us, But anyways, I'm
an optimist.
I'm an
optimist to say that we have not. I don't like to believe that we have failed. We have not failed. We have all continued to work at this. Many groups, thousands of people. Okay. But sometimes we have to sit back, and when somebody gives us a report card, whether it's, I happen to come from Wall Street, so we look at the Dow Jones all the time, and that's a report card too. And we have to say, why did it happen this way? And I think we have to spend a fair amount of time discussing among ourselves, strategizing among ourselves. And one of the recommendations that I have is for all of us. We are now over 20 million people in America, which is a sizable number. It's as large a number of African Americans were when Martin Luther King was on his crusade. So it is a formal number. This whole business of, it's just a minor minority is bogus. There are communities that are highly concentrated with Asians today. There are certain cities in California and even Utah and Arizona, I believe, where multiple administrations of Asian mayors have served. So it is happening. However, what the report card shows us is that people don't want to believe it. And therefore, I believe as part of our movement, we need to encourage each other as well as teach each other how to communicate better with our fellow Americans.
Henry, wow. Let me interrupt you if you don't mind. While we're on this topic, Susan Yu asked a very interesting question. She asked, how do we change the report card?
Well, that's what I'm trying to address. And thank you very much for your question, Susan. I believe, and having been Asian all my life, knowing a little bit about the subject, I don't believe we have effectively communicated as a group all of our achievements, all of our contributions, and unlike today, whenever faced with a challenge, many of our fellow Asians have chosen to just be quiet. I know going back many decades when I was a child, and I think many of us have the same experience, we were taught by parents just to let it go and move on and study hard and succeed. Well, much of Asian society in America has succeeded. We've seen all the numbers about how many Asians make more money per capita, and et cetera, et cetera. But I turned to the report card. It didn't move the needle. And that's a reality. We all have to look in the mirror and say, it's a little bit like if you were the manager of a baseball team and you're always in next to last place, but you win some good games and so on, but you haven't moved up. So what's wrong? And we all have to sort of look in the mirror and understand that. I've come to the general conclusion, having served in many different capacities, in many different institutional outlets, that we need to communicate better. Many of us don't talk to even our own family members about this. We need to talk to the people sitting next to us at the dinner table and ask them what they think of these crises and how we can all better address it. Not to mention our work colleagues, our associations that we have as with neighbors and everywhere else, and to bring it to the fore. Most people say, well, we don't want to bring up these negative impressions. The issue is out there. Our people are being stabbed. There's 7,000 as of today from the last 12 months. And those are only the people who reported it. God knows how many haven't reported it. Mm-hmm. And, you know, that I just compared 22-year difference on those two surveys. 22 years from now, do we still want to be here talking like us and not moving the needle? We have got to. Those numbers have to come in. It first struck my attention in 1999 when I opened the Wall Street Journal and I said, what is this? Liberals and Democrats, the most progressive people, have 60% distrust or dislike for developments in China. This is opposite, antithetical to everything most people believe. Oh, that's not the case. And 22 years later, the numbers also have not changed. So we all have to work at this. And it's not just a matter of saying, well, we're trying. Yes, we're going to have our rallies and it's a great success and we're going to have composed songs and everything else. But let's also, as a matter of just personal mental exercise, keep a mental note of, have we moved the needle?
That's a great point, Henry. Great point.
And that most everybody always points to, and I've been very involved in it. Oh, we must get the public officials to change and accept it more. So more appointments, more this, more that. But how do the public officials and the people who are the enablers of the message, i.e. the media, get those ideas? How many of us have talked to people? How many reporters are friends of ours? Okay, whether even high school newspaper reporters.
Great points.
The message is across America is that, oh, Asians, they're only a minority and they don't matter. Up until quite recently, well, you go to Washington, D.C., you walk the halls of Congress and say, I hardly have any Asians in my district. It's like 2%. So why do I care?
Great question. Great answers. Thank you. Thank you, Henry. We have a question that we want to ask from Anne and Dara, and Ka can answer. What can we do to change our perception as the perpetual foreigner? Anne, I mean, look at that from a non-Asian perspective. I mean, what would you suggest, Anne? I mean, you've been...
Well, I would love to address this because although I am an ally, I'm also the parent of an Asian American child. So I don't get to be an ally completely on the sidelines because it does impact my family. And my child has been harassed on a frequent basis on the subway in New York. My child has been the subject of hateful, very harmful racism. But we've also been allies for others. And after working with multiple Asian American community service organizations here in Philadelphia, I want to say that I'm pleased to say I don't see in this community that the Asian Americans are quiet, docile, and standing by. But I do want to call out on allies. What are you really doing to support your Asian American family members, friends, and neighbors and businesses? Are you really making an effort to hold your politicians accountable? Are they showing up at banquets once a year for a photo op, or are they delivering programs and services that benefit these communities? And if you're working within political spheres, are you calling on those politicians to do more than just show up for a photo op? Deliver.
Thank you. Yeah, good. Dara, can you comment on that? What can we do?
Absolutely. I love this question. I love this question. And it is number one, asking the question is important. It means that there's a desire, right? And you'll hear this across the board anytime you want to get in, anybody wants to get involved in anything civil rights related. Is number one is always educate yourself. The internet is boundless in terms of resources, but we are seeing more and more resources that are directed specifically at the Asian American experience. I know that we've put some up on our website. It's taken a lot of introspection for me personally, and that's something that I would encourage for everyone is before you can look at the Asian American experience as a whole, for those of us who are living in this skin and who are perhaps still dealing with traumas from childhood, still dealing with those things that we were bullied about that we didn't know were deeply seated in our traumatic experience that's affecting us as adults. So number one is educate yourself, do that, have those tough conversations with yourself. Secondly is to, after educating yourself, there's going to need to be some dialogue, right? So that you can have a sounding board and see, like, where's everyone else on this? Am I just out here way in the left field? So I always suggest to have those safe dialogues with people in your inner circle first. You don't want to just have a random conversation about race with someone at work, with someone who at school who you're just not close enough with to have an honest conversation about that without alienating them. And then so I wanted to leave with just a couple of terms to allow people to Google if you're not already familiar, which many of us probably are. But when we talk about the model minority myth and we talk about proximity to whiteness, we often don't talk about the invalidation that we face both within ourselves as a community and from other communities of color and also from white communities. So we often tell ourselves, oh, well, our struggle isn't as bad as perhaps the Black struggle or the brown struggle. And we often start to measure up our difficulties with others. And this is not a contest about who has it worse. This is simply stating the fact that we have a narrative that is unique, that deserves its own space. So that goes back to the concept of comparative suffering, where we tend to invalidate ourselves. And when we go to speak for ourselves, we often find that we have not properly equipped ourselves with a voice. So that's a concept that I just wanted to share with everyone. And I do want to encourage you all to take some time, Google books, like look up books like White Fragility, look up Critical Race Theory, Grace Lee Boggs, look up cases like Korematsu. And it took me a long time to even learn who Yuri Kochiyama was. We don't learn those things in school. There are a lot of things that were left out of our education that we have to take upon ourselves to educate. So being here is a big part of that. So if you're here on this call and you're here and you're open to learn, please continue the fight.
Well, I just have to cut in for 1 second. So Yuri's birthday, actually, her 100th birthday is this coming May 19th, 2021. So we are really honored that Paul and Madison, and if you watch our webinar on May 19th, you hear the story about Yuri and Grace Lee Boggs, deeply involved in the civil rights movement of the 60s. So I'm giving a plug to myself, but please join that webinar. And I don't think that many of you know that it's Yuri's 100th anniversary of her birthday. But anyways, Kang, please share us your take.
Well, before I do, I just want to add one more book to the reading list, since Dara gave an excellent reading list. I'd also encourage everyone to look up and read Yellow by law professor Frank Wu. It is an excellent book, and it addresses a lot of the topics that Dara just mentioned around the model minority myth, how that's dangerous not only to our Asian American community, but how it's been used to demonize other communities of color. So, it also addresses how, as Asian Americans, we are not a monolith. We do not speak one language. We do not come from the same country. We do not all look the same, So I think that that's another great book to add to the list. But yeah, so to answer that question specifically, what else can people continue to do to stand up and contribute and fight for this cause? I would just say, in addition to everything else that's been said by Anne and by Dara, I would say to amplify, right? I think it's incumbent upon us as Asian Americans to amplify one another, to support one another. There was a statistic that came out recently, something about like 42%, or rather, I think maybe even 52% of Americans couldn't name a famous Asian American person, which blew my mind because we have many famous Asian Americans out there doing many amazing things in various industries. So I think if we continue to, to Dara's point, look inward to see, what is it that maybe we could help with this particular dialogue, but then also when you find someone that is Asian American who inspires you, who is putting in the work in whatever way that they are, to amplify that and to show that support, because it's not something that is being done for us, right? So we have to do it for each other, which is something I truly believe as well. So I have a modest following of fans and from around the world. So I try to use my platform to share other people, other Asian Americans who I believe are incredible human beings who excel at their particular craft. And I think too, it's important that when we are having these conversations, a lot of them are uncomfortable and can be tough, that just being mindful of two things. It's a very delicate balancing act between not wanting to pull any punches, but also not wanting to alienate, to Dara's point, as she said, right? You do catch more bees with honey, and it is important to kind of bring people into the fold. But once they're there, and if they express their willingness to learn, then have some of those tough conversations, right? Make room to get a little uncomfortable. And I think that that's really, really critical as well. So for me, I used like I said, I wrote this song and I used my creative outlet to try to start that dialogue. It's not just a catchy tune that I wanted to focus on. It was, making sure I was incorporating words and phrases like internment, model minority myth, all of these things that typically you wouldn't find in lyrics. But I think it's important for people to be able to understand that this song is deeply rooted in historical struggles and important important social conversations that are happening today. So, I think just continuing to have that dialogue is critical.
So
Folks,
before I turn it back, I'm sorry. Before I turn it back to Ken, let me just kind of give it a little wrap up, so to speak. So first of all, the Chinese American Heritage Foundation is organizing 31 days of webinar, which Ken mentioned. And to us, these 31 days of webinar is, and webinars across the country, celebrations across the country during AAPI month. It's really our case. We're presenting a case in the court of public opinion. The rally on Memorial Day, Monday, May 31st, is our closing argument. Each city experienced racism history differently, and each city will present their case as a closing argument. So I think Henry touched on a lot of stuff. So and you guys actually touched on a lot of stuff. So a lot of stuff that you guys have touched on is exactly what we're doing. The rallies are pan-Asian. It's not just Chinese or Japanese or Koreans talking about we should help each other, but it's really allies. The Blacks, the Hispanics, the Latino, people of color, people who are disenfranchised on the solidarity stage, standing up for each other. And one thing that separates us from the other rally is that I think it's one of the first time that the older organization, like the Family Association, for example, my family association, Lee Family Association, 1866, working together with the Council of Korean Americans, only 10 years old. So I think it's so important that we bridge the gap, that the older generation and the newer generation working together. And when we decide on May 31st as the date, because we decided this was the last day of May, but we did not realize when we decided that May 31st was also Memorial Day. And Virginia touched on it quietly, and Henry touched on it. What better way to show that we are Americans, that we are proud Americans, but announcing to the world of all these incredible Asian Americans who have served in the military since the Civil War. A lot of that history is not taught in the history book, so that needs to be included. So I just hope that everyone would participate in the rally. And of course, if you cannot attend one of the 20 rallies, it's Memorial Day. You have a barbecue in your backyard, make a sign, solidarity against AAPI hate, take a selfie, take a picture of your family holding up a sign, send it to us on our website. We're gonna post it, okay? It's gonna be veterans and memorial service all across the country. Have those veterans memorial services. Talk about the AAPI community, how the Asian American also served proudly and made sacrifices in the military. So I have 13 members of my family that are US military veterans, and Uncle Kwan died in combat during World War II. So we lost a loved one serving for our country. Stories like that is never shared. So we encourage everyone to do your part on May 31st. It's gonna be a moment where your grandchildren's gonna ask you, Daddy, Granddad, where were you on May 31st, 2021? When the Asian American community finally got together. And we don't want this rally to be the end. The whole point being is that the organizers of these rallies, Pan-Asian allies working together, they will continue to work together going forward, right? Because Asian hate is not gonna end on June 1st. So the whole thing is that we all continue to work together, young and old, bridging the racial divide. So Ken, back to you. I talked long enough. I don't wanna, wear out my walking mat.
So on behalf,
actually, one last comment. I'm sorry. That's one last comment. Okay, our AAPI American Stories Talk would not be successful without Henry Tang. Okay, without Henry's backing, our rally across the country would not be successful. I have to be honest. I have no bandwidth. Okay, I can talk 1,000 times, and all Henry needs to say is one sentence. Okay, he can move mountains in one sentence. I can't do anything. So Henry, I really thank you for your unwavering support. Our talks and our rally would not be where it is today without your support. So Uncle Henry, thank you. I call you Uncle Henry because of my respect for you.
You're much too kind, and I really don't deserve such accolades, because all of this work is a joint effort from Asians as well as non-Asians. This is a world of 7 billion people. Asians are probably 3 to 4 billion of it, and we have to all work towards finding a way to integrating into each other. The world is moving in a changing direction very quickly, and I think we are all ambassadors. I really mean that. We are all ambassadors, starting with our own families, our neighbors, our colleagues, our bosses, our employees, to help people understand the role of Asians in this world. And especially in this country. So we'll just start right here. I mean, as I mentioned, I mean, we didn't get into a lot of the details, but there are thousands of Asians who are have been named in corporate patents as part of their corporate employment, but they're anonymous. And if you, I know if you dig into a Microsoft, an Apple, an IBM, all of these places, many, many Asians help build these companies, which means they help build America. And that's what all of us are all about. It's not about me as an individual. I've spent a lot of years in this because I'm passionate about it. And I think it's important. I think it's important that the world understands the contribution of Asians, not just Chinese or Japanese or Korean, but all of South Asia, There's people from Bangladesh, people from India, Pakistan, all have, in a way, contributed to this. I mean, I could go on and give a college lecture about GDP and Asia and all that, but we won't. I think you get the general drift. My attempts have been to recruit and ask people to join in this dialogue and struggle. We are 20 million people. If every one of us just joins in the next 2 to 3 years and picks up one person here in America to understand the Asian story, that's another 20 million people. And that's how we move the needle. I'm very big on people saying, oh, let's get the big shots to do it, the rich and famous. They've got all the money, they've got all the power. No, it's not about that. Because that Pew survey today, it comes from Mr. and Mrs. everywhere. Or as Chinese says, Lao Bai Xing, which is the source of Committee 100, by the way.
Thank you, Henry. I think, Anne, you wanted to show the website?
Well, yes, we'd really love to invite everyone who is listening to the webinar or watching it on live or may see it in the next few days. Please visit our website, theyellowwhistle.org. You can request whistles for your organization, and we really want to hear your stories and see how you're able to use this as a way to empower your communities. We've got a group of grandparents from Boston. They call themselves GASP, and they're amazing. Just a group of grandparents out protesting AAPI hate. We've got all kinds of organizations, and this is about empowering. And even Richard Liu was seen on MSNBC with holding a microphone to someone he was interviewing with a yellow whistle on his wrist today. So this is about empowering and providing a tool, but it also should be used to encourage people to reach out and make those connections, make those demands of your officials, of your other members of your community to stand with you. And as allies, if you're not reaching out, it's time for you to reach out. And
if you want to see Richard Liu again and Oscar Tang and Henry Tang and Ambassador Gary Locke, please tune in tomorrow night, okay? They're going to be on at 8 p.m.
Yes, we've actually been posting about it to our socials. So we invite everyone to share their images with us on our social. Anything we can do to expand and enhance the voice.
So, Anne, on behalf of San Antonio Lodge Chinese American Citizens Alliance, I submitted a request for some of the whistles. So we hope to get them in time for our 31st rally so Wonderful. We can blow those whistles, all right? So on behalf of the Chinese American Heritage Foundation, I want to thank all of our panelists. There is so much to talk about, and I wish we had a couple more hours to really hear your insightful thoughts. Pa, lots of comments about your great voice, about your wonderful song. And I think people are getting on YouTube and start subscribing to your channel. So thank you very much. Yeah. Wilson, thank you very much. Panelists, thank you again. And again, this concludes our 15th webinar for the CAHF. Thank you very much, everybody.